Welcome to China Tech Talk, the weekly discussion of technology and startups here in China. I am John Artman, editor-in-chief of TechNode, and as always, I'm joined by Matthew Brennan, founder of China Channel. So this is the second part of our year-end review, so looking back at 2017. We've already done the top 3 of our top 5, and now we're moving on to talk about live streaming and Tencent's media empire. And so as with the last episode, there is chapter markers. So if you're using a modern podcast player, you can just skip along to whichever topic you like. So we'll be talking about live streaming, Tencent, as well as some other honorable mentions, including mini programs, Wuzhen, co-working, and a few more. Hope you enjoy it. Yeah. So let's move on to number 4. So live streaming and video. So this is kind of an interesting one because in some ways this was one of those trends that kind of began in 2016 and went very strong into 2017, but then kind of lost some of its momentum as the market matured into 2017. And so I think that really live streaming and short video is kind of the story of the first half of the year, where it really became much more used in general, but then also a lot of companies were using video live streaming and short video as a way to monetize. Weibo, for example, they were actually able to they had a banner year because of live streaming in short video. Momo was able to become profitable because of live streaming and video offerings as well. Momo, they're a social networking site, basically connecting strangers, and they weren't doing so well. And now that they have live streaming, they have in-app purchases of virtual gifts and virtual currency, and they're able to now monetize off of that.
Yeah, so I agree. It's more definitely, you could argue that live stream was the trend of 2016 in China, because that was when it was like super frothy, and there was an incredible amount of new apps on the market, and it was all very new and fresh. I think it's matured in 2017. But having said that, I completely agree. It's transformed the business models of certain apps. I mean, Weibo, it's really had a huge impact on them and on Momo, and they're not the only players. And I think also this year, by the end of the year now, it's definitely matured. Before in 2016, I think it was very early days. We were seeing people using it. Some of it was quite dodgy. People got banned for eating bananas suggestively. There was lots of semi sort of like, is this kind of soft porn or is this what is this stuff going on? Now there's been regulation coming from the government. It's actually very tame. I think people have got bored of watching people just sing or do silly things to sort of
eating noodles.
Yeah, the barrier to entry and the expectations of people have risen a bit, and we've seen like the explosion of applications like Kuaishou, right, which I think is still doing really, really well. And this trend is very much linked, I think, and that's why it's still rolling out now, is because it's the wave of the internet coming to tier 3 and tier 4 and these more rural areas of China. And we shouldn't really underestimate this, because these places, we've got a huge number of Chinese people who are in these sort of poorer, more inland, lower income, and just less educated people, I guess, who are sort of discovering the internet only in the last, probably only in the last year or two, and their sort of habits online are completely different from me or you, John, or from people in Beijing, Shanghai, and markets like that. These people have different needs, different level of education, different likes, and so the apps like Kuaishou are really resonating very strongly with this group because it's kind of very easy to understand, very easy to use, and the content that's popular on these is content, is user generated content, not professionally generated content, and it's generated by people in those markets, in areas, so they're able to create content which even myself, I find it even. I think I'm pretty in touch with Chinese society. I find a lot of the content just completely,
Stupid.
yeah, just unbelievable that people watch it. Quite frankly,
well, it reminds me of like early days on YouTube or other video of like, you know, people, you know, stupid young men like jumping off roofs and pretending to be WWE stars or like, you know, trying to reenact Jackass stunts.
Yeah,
and
Jackass
like
is a good analogy. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it's like Jackass stuff, right? But
yeah.
less, just much lower production values.
Well, exactly. And that's the thing. I think what's really interesting too is kind of seeing the cultural divide, because like you and I, we look at this, and even if we were to see this in back at home, we'd be like, oh my God, these people are really dumb. But it's really kind of interesting in China, because there is this, you know, fairly clear dividing line between people who live in cities and people who don't. People who are more affluent and have really reaped the benefits of development and modernization in China, and those who really haven't. You know, like the people who are producing these videos, you know, like these are like the same people that deliver your packages, the same people that deliver your your food when you do that. I mean, in some cases, maybe even your driver when you call a DD, or you know, the people making stuff in factories. And so this is where the demographic of this is you know, very, very blue collar in a way. And so, you know, in Chinese they would say, oh, you know, 这个太 low 了. And when they say low, they're actually saying low, like LOW. And so it's one of those occasions where Chinese has borrowed a word from English, and basically what they mean is that it's too low brow. It's too, I mean, for lack of a better word, stupid.
Yeah. I was really struggling for the first half of this year to understand why Weibo was doing so well. And it was bugging me. Like, why is Weibo, their financials are really kicking ass. But when I use the app, I just hate it. I was just like, this is such a horrible user experience. You know, what's going on here? And I've slowly, you know, been able to understand it. I think a lot, or at least I think I understand it now. Maybe I don't. But one of the key factors is this trend of, I think a lot of the people using Weibo now are in these sort of, is this huge population of inland, less educated people, blue collar workers, as you say, and below blue collar workers, you know, people really working out in the farms and stuff. And these people are very tolerant to ads. They're very tolerant to advertisements.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, ads. It always strikes me just how many ads there are in China, and how tolerant of advertising people are. Mm-hmm. If it's free and it's powered by ads, it's very like there's very little friction when it comes to advertisements, it seems.
Yeah, and a lot of them are just obsessed with things like celebrity gossip, mm-hmm. and so that's where Weibo really comes into its own, because that's pretty much, so much of the platform is just like mindless celebrity gossip. It's just you know, about the sort of sex lives of singers and movie stars, and yeah, that stuff resonates really well with a lot of people like this.
Well, it's also much safer than people getting angry about government policy or government actions.
Right. Yeah, it's Weibo, I think, has just moved so far away from where it used to be when it started off, and now it's I mean, in terms of their financials, it's great for investors, but personally, I think the platform has some major issues. I don't really enjoy. I don't enjoy using the app personally, and I think the direction they're going in is kind of unsustainable. But yeah, that's a totally different podcast, I think. But
yeah, so just one last point about Weibo, and then I want to bring up something that I wanted to mention about live streaming. So I mean, Weibo, you have to remember also is that they got a large investment from Alibaba, and so they're basically part of the Alibaba ecosystem now, where there's a lot of KOLs, there's a lot of people out there selling stuff,
right?
And it's linking directly to Taobao shops, directly to Tmall shops, and so I think that's certainly part of it. In Taobao, looking at live streaming, Taobao has basically made products into content in order to sell more. And this kind of dovetails into what one of the kind of the opposite end of, like we're talking about Kuaishou and some of this lowbrow content. Kind of the opposite end of that spectrum is the rise of KOLs online. And in particular, looking at lifestyle KOLs, clothing, luxury brands, and things like that. It's basically become an industry in 2017. Whereas in 2016, I mean, it was nascent, but live streaming and video in particular has really allowed this segment of marketing of advertising to grow exponentially. And so you look at Weibo, you look at Taobao, you look at Momo, all these different live streaming platforms, and one of the big reason that they're able to be successful is because of the people creating that content. And these are individuals who have basically, in many cases, made themselves into a business. So maybe they just go on Momo and they just talk for a while and they get virtual gifts, or maybe they do something even bigger. Is they're able to monetize their community by being key opinion leaders in certain areas, whether it's makeup, fashion, clothing, travel, cooking, playing games, like on Douyu or something like that. But then this whole area of marketing and advertising has been able to open up in large part because of live streaming and video.
Yeah. I would say it's a pretty strong trend in 2016 now, but maybe I'm more in tune to it. We cover a lot of that content in the conference that I do once a year in Shanghai, the China Chat. A lot of that's about KOL marketing. It's just a red hot topic for both years we've been doing it there. And I expect that to continue into next year as well. It's one of those trends. Influencer marketing is not going away, and China's ahead. And so prediction for 2018, that one's going to keep rolling along. I think it's a general internet trend that, especially with the rise of video, people are able to make connections and build large followings and then monetize those through e-commerce stores and product placement from brands. And that's not going to go away. That's not going to go away. I think some of the trends that we're talking about here actually links kind of into one thing which we haven't covered. We haven't even got on our list, which is the sort of, I think this year is also a breakout year for Toutiao. And
yeah, totally.
It's maybe that's been coming a long while. Maybe it's just they've got the recognition this year from people, from the media, that they are a serious player in the market. But certainly their valuations have increased quite a lot this year, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, I think with Toutiao at least, I think it's just the language barrier. I mean, they've been getting a lot of attention on Chinese media for quite some time, and I think that if you've been here like you and I, you've known about Toutiao since basically the beginning. But I think that for myself, it has been a bit surprising to see how well a content aggregation application has done, and so I think it's very surprising in that sense. I mean, they're worth, what is it, 20 billion USD was their last valuation.
I saw 30 somewhere.
Oh, that's right. Most recently, they got even more money recently.
30 billion.
Jesus. which is just absolutely crazy. But the thing is, you got to remember about Toutiao is that it's not just Toutiao. Like the parent company is doing quite a bit more than that, and they're really moving into video in particular with with Douyin. I believe the foreign
Musical.ly
is called TikTok, and they recently bought Musical.ly.
And they got watermelon videos, Sigua Shopping. That's also doing really well. So a couple of properties. So yeah, it's all bundled together. I think it's broad trends that's been driven for them. AI is a big part of it as well, right? But what we're talking about mostly here, I think, is the trend of short video and live stream playing out.
Exactly. And speaking of entertainment, number 5 is Tencent's entertainment empire. I think the big one obviously is Honor of Kings, but then of course we can't forget about Tencent Music and China Literature. So China Literature went IPO in Hong Kong about a month ago. It was very successful, and it looks like Tencent Music is going to be going IPO sometime next year. But it's just watching Tencent's kind of culture, entertainment, social empire grow and grow and grow. It's absolutely fascinating to see a company who their core product, is this social offering of WeChat and of QQ, and seeing how they're able to monetize it by the satellite products and in-app purchases in those satellite products is pretty amazing.
Yeah, well, they've always had gaming for a very, very long time as their core revenue generator, let's say, and gaming is entertainment, really, isn't it? It's a very interactive and modern form of entertainment. Now they're just expanding. Well, they have been for a very long time, haven't they? Expanding out into all different types of entertainment. And we're just seeing a couple of IPOs come up. They're spinning out, music. They're spinning out literature. They've got a comics and manga division as well that does really, really well. They've got a couple of movie. They've got their own sort of movie division in film. They've got 2 of them, actually, I think. Penguin Pictures and Tencent Movies or something. I forget the actual names. Two separate divisions based on that. And of course, gaming is the cash cow. And then they've got Tencent Video, which is, by some measures, at least in the last earnings call, they said it was leading the market. I know you posted something somewhere, John, recently that iQIYI was leading.
So in terms of, I'm not sure about Tencent Video or iQIYI's revenue or monetization, but according to some third-party reports, iQIYI leads in user penetration. So they're at about 36%, and Tencent Video is second at about 33%, and Youku Tudou is a pretty far third at about 15%. So again, I'm not sure about monetization, but certainly iQIYI is a big contender.
That's quite amazing, because Youku Tudou used to dominate this market, didn't they? I think.
Well, they used to be the only ones. I mean, it used to be a duopoly between the two, and then you had Lusher come in. I'm actually kind of surprised at how well iQIYI is doing. It started off as a joint venture with Baidu and another company. Just recently, I think over the past 1 or 2 years, Baidu purchased all of it back, and so now it's completely under Baidu, and it's actually because it's branded differently, it's easy to forget that actually Baidu does own this, and that that in the consumer space that they still do have at least a fairly strong presence.
Yeah, it's definitely one of their big success stories, right? Is iQIYI. And then, it's easy to forget Baidu. They have they're still really strong in maps, right? They're still really strong in video.
I don't know about the data with maps, but I don't use Baidu Maps, and I don't think many people at TechNode use Baidu Maps because it's not very good. Again, I don't have the data. I don't have the data in front of me, but my own personal experience, I don't enjoy it.
I could probably find it. I did research them. They've got decent market share. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I mean, a strong competition from Tencent. I use Tencent Maps.
I use
Galder,
which is
Alibaba's offering,
Alibaba,
which has like good Daohong thing. They got like a good voice.
Oh, it's great. It's really good. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, they have Ling Julian, who has like a very sexy up ahead.
Yeah,
all right.
I think the Tencent one's got that now as well. Yeah.
Okay, but we're fading a little bit here, I think. So Tencent's entertainment empire, I think, the big one, at least in terms of mind share, really has been Honor of Kings.
Right.
Just looking at the amazing success of this one IP, and I think that Tencent is one of those companies. Like, so maybe Alibaba, they know how to get you to buy things. Tencent is a company that knows how to create experiences, I think, and that's really kind of their real key. I mean, like, WeChat is an amazing experience for an app compared to many others. And you look at Honor of Kings, and the developers, I think they just understand Chinese culture so well. They understand the social nature of or the ability to leverage social. And not just like social networks, but literally those people around you. The number of times that I've walked by in my office, people, as a group, all playing Honor of Kings together. So you have like 4 or 5 people, and they're all in the same instance, on the same team, and they're able to yell at each other and say, "No, do this, no, do that," and so on and so on. I think that really that has been one of the major keys of this game is leveraging that sense of like, hey, we're a group, we're all playing this together.
Yeah, we covered it we put a whole episode on Honor of Kings, didn't we? Quite a while back. And so with listeners who want to know more about that, then they can listen back to that one. I think we went quite deep on it there. And very recently, I think just a day or two ago, they announced, I think it's either opened in the US market or it's going to open in the US market. It's already, I downloaded it when I was in Southeast Asia recently. It's available in a couple of markets there. And I also played it in Europe last week. And so it's in those markets. And the Arena of Valor version is actually quite faithful, I think. I was quite intrigued. Obviously, it's got a lot of differences. They got Superman, Batman in there, Wonder Woman, characters like that, which you don't see in the Chinese version. Prediction for 2018: I doubt it's going to do as well as it is in China. I mean, it'd be really very difficult to get to that kind of level. But
yep.
I don't know.
The thing is, like,
the gaming industry specifically to make a sort of educated guess over whether it will resonate well with outside China.
But the thing is, Tencent doesn't need Honor of Kings to do well. They already have Supercell, which does Clash of Clans and most recently Clash Royale. Very popular, very successful games, and also they have Riot, which does League of Legends, which is probably next to Dota is the biggest. It's the biggest arena battle game, and it's such that even it's played competitively professionally, so you have teams built around playing LOL, and so I don't think that they really need it to succeed. Obviously it would be a big feather in their cap for it to succeed, and I think it would be also just kind of a proof that a Chinese company can globalize a cultural product. I mean, you look at the companies that have done well globally from China are mostly hardware at this point. So Huawei, DJI, Xiaomi, these have done really, really well in the markets that they've been in. But you haven't really seen any strong cultural products coming from China that were really well localized. And I think that if Tencent can have a modicum of success, it will really prove that China is ready to begin localizing its cultural content into other markets. And again, if they are able to do that, then I would say that that other companies really need to be paying attention to how they did it and thinking about how this might affect their own business.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. I think that's where we could see some very interesting things happen there, because all the big battles have kind of been won outside China. Socials being won by Facebook, search by Google, etc. And so it's kind of seen. It's also mature, but I think they've got some very, very strong companies in China that have been really good at understanding Chinese users and working out new business models and taking opportunities in different areas and running with them. Total's a great example of this. And then, how these guys are going to really, once they work out how to adapt things for other markets and start, understanding those users, which they will, we might see some interesting things.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's it for our top 5. I think some honorable mentions just to maybe talk about just for a couple of minutes each. So WeChat with the mini programs.
Yeah.
I think that it was kind of interesting to see all the hype come out before they were released, and then we saw a lot of disappointment, I think. And now we're kind of seeing, I wouldn't say hype, but more enthusiasm as the use cases are actually being rolled out. And it looks like WeChat is making mini programs a fairly large part of their strategy moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's one for 2018 for sure. So mini programs is gotten a lot hotter, a lot more interest in the last few months, and a lot of it's about e-commerce. It's become clear that a big part of the strategy for them is to do with supercharging, boosting e-commerce on the WeChat platform, making it much easier to buy stuff, much faster, a smoother experience that is much more like what Chinese are used to doing on Taobao and Tmall. And so it's clear they're using that as a sort of weapon to dig in a little bit and get a little bit more share of the e-commerce market away from those guys. But the vision for mini programs is much bigger than just e-commerce stores, and they're continuing to roll out new features at a pretty steady rate. And the next month there's the annual opener class for WeChat in Guangzhou. I'll be down there. I'm sure they're going to announce a whole bunch of new stuff there as well. It's still exciting times. It's still early days for mini programs, and I'm still pretty bullish on them, even though it definitely hasn't played out how I think anyone, including the WeChat team, thought it would do in 2017. The vision still makes a lot of sense, and they are definitely making progress.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that really the use case, as you said, retail and things like that. I think there's some other use cases as well that are quite compelling. But I think it's really interesting to see how mini programs are really kind of closing that loop between online to offline, because before a lot of it was, okay, I'm going to use my phone and I'm going to order a service that's going to appear in the real world. Whereas now there's an object in the real world. I use a QR code to scan it, and I get this mini program that offers a service or that gives me information or allows me to interact with the product or service in a way that I could not before. And so it's really closing that loop between online and offline that I think is super compelling. But also we want to talk very quickly about the VPN situation in China. I think that what we saw is kind of par for the course in a sense, where the Chinese government is very interested in not allowing VPNs to continue to exist, at least not personal ones. And so I think a lot of the moves weren't necessarily surprising. I think some of the swiftness of some of them caught a lot of people, including myself, off guard. But looking back on it now, it does make a lot of sense, in particular with the 19th Congress that happened in October. You got to remember, this is the biggest political event in China every 5 years, and they're going to make sure that nothing could possibly go wrong. And so part of that, of course, is controlling information access and people accessing websites outside of China.
Yeah, it made big global headlines, all the sort of VPN bans, but it's been a long time coming. And as a trend going through to 2018, I I'm almost certain that it will get more difficult to access VPNs in China. So,
yeah, and it's kind of
yeah, it's
depressing.
not a good trend for people like us. I don't think it's a good trend for Chinese people in general, to be honest. But it's a fact of life here, and I don't see it changing.
I don't either. It is disappointing, I think, because what the government is doing is creating a kind of not like this weird hybrid between an internet and an intranet, where they've balkanized the internet so that that really, if you're in China, all your the things, the online services that you're going to be using, the information that you're going to be accessing, it's going to be the lowest friction is going to be what they approve, which is very, very powerful. And that's, there's a lot of stuff out there that is not blocked directly, but the friction is quite high in terms of getting there. And then also, if you're outside of China coming in, it can be very, very slow sometimes as well. And I think that's intentional. So it is definitely a bit disappointing. And so Apple in China. So we talked a little bit about Xiaomi, Oppo, Vivo, and how well they did in India and how they're globalizing. But Apple in China, I think, is a really interesting topic to talk about for a few minutes. In the beginning of the year, it felt like they came into 2017 fairly weak. Now we're looking into 2018, and say what you will about the iPhone 10, but it's done pretty well in China, and they've also taken steps to acquiesce to the Chinese government taking down certain applications, including VPNs, but also including things like Instapaper and Pocket, which is very disappointing. So I think that really, going into 2018, Apple is in a fairly strong position. And they still have quite a bit in terms of localizing some of their services. I mean, there's really no point in using Maps. I just started using Apple Music. It's kind of okay. It's the price is right. It's 15 RMB per month for family sharing, so it's not so bad. But I think in general, Apple Pay is still non-existent and still has no chance.
Yeah, they've made some big changes to their strategy in 2017. That's pretty clear. And most of them are good. I mean, they've opened up research and development divisions as well. And Tim Cook is definitely spending a lot more time on the ground. So there's clear indications that they are aware that the Chinese market, I don't know how they could not be aware that the Chinese market was having some issues. Pretty clear from the financials. And broadly, I think all the moves they've made make sense and are good, but it's whether it's enough in my mind. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, they appointed a China head the first time they've done that, and she came directly from their main management team. So I think that obviously shows, and she's Chinese, so that shows that they do take the China market very, very seriously. And I do think that going into 2018, their China strategy will get much, much stronger. I mean, China is always going to be their second most important market after the States, maybe even become their first most important market. Obviously, they need to prioritize and get their act together. But speaking of Tim Cook, of course, there was the Wuzhen conference as well that we should talk about. This has been happening since 2014, but it does seem that this year got a little bit more attention, and Tim Cook even went there to talk about Apple, talk about the internet. I think from my point of view, Wuzhen is basically just this big propaganda show. Mm-hmm. It allows the Chinese government to say, hey, we care about the internet. We want people to care about our internet. But at the end of the day, there's nothing really. There's no real action coming out of it. It's just a chance for China to gather people together.
Yeah, what the lineup of people who attend it is seriously impressive. So it's, I think, and now I don't know. It's my impression. Maybe it's. I think you were saying earlier, John. They have big names every year, but this year with Tim Cook, with Google was there as well. I get the feeling we're going to see more big names from the West turn up next year. It's certainly gained a lot more press this year in English language publications and media, I think, is my impression anyway. And yeah, it's like, is there a bigger conference in China for the internet? I don't know.
Not really. I mean, not one that has the same international presence. I mean, there is GMIC, but that's it's a bit niche in a way. Obviously, there's TechCrunch as well. I mean, I gotta give a shout out to our conference, but it's not at the same level. That's for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that there was that picture that was circulating around, and I think that you posted with some of the names of the people. But I mean, like, you had the heaviest hitters of the Chinese internet all eating dinner together, and I think that picture, that one picture, with Pony Ma, with Lei Jun, with Richard Liu, and all these other people, really just kind of brought it home, like just how big of a conference it was, and just in terms of bringing people together.
Yeah, I think that was the one sort of picture. I saw that and I was like, whoa, that is a serious table. That is no kidding.
Can you imagine what they were talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it was all Tencent friendly ecosystem. I mean, it was organized. That meal was organized by JD and Meituan Dianping. So, and then you look at who's there, and it's all like neutral or Tencent friendly companies. And I bet there was some serious talk going down there. It just, for me, it looked like a sort of mafia picture, really. I mean, it's all men. There's no women in the picture.
No women
at all. The seating arrangement is like really formal. You can see exactly the pecking order from where people are sat. It just, Pony's in the middle as the Don. It really was, when you analyze what's in that picture, it's got there's a lot to be read into, I think.
But I think, I think that characterization as Pony Ma as the Don, I think is fairly accurate. For me, looking at the Chinese internet, it's very clear that there are these ecosystems, and you mentioned that JD and Meituan, they organize the dinner. I mean, they're basically, if you think about it in a feudal sense, Tencent is the king, Pony Ma is the king, and then these other players, part of the ecosystem, are almost their vassals, paying tribute to the king, and basically owing their allegiance and their fortunes, to Pony Ma and Tencent. So I mean, it was absolutely fascinating. But speaking of bringing people together, another thing that we want to talk about very quickly is co-working. I think that 2017 really was the year of co-working. Obviously, it was a trend coming into the year, but this year is really when we see a lot of maturity in the market. We see that Chinese players are the market in China is consolidating. WeWork, which is the largest co-working company in the entire world, has become more aggressive in China. Naked Hub, which is a local player founded by expats, has begun to globalize. They recently merged with JustCo, which is a co-working company based out of Singapore. And then, of course, there is URWork, which is a Chinese founded co-working space. Mao Daqiang, who used to work for Vanke. Vanke is one of the largest property development companies in China. They've established their position as the number one, number two co-working player, and they are also going global. So I think co-working is one of those trends that we cannot ignore.
Yeah, and we had Naked Hub on the podcast a couple of episodes ago, so that was interesting to get their viewpoint. And they were at TechCrunch as well recently, where we both met up with them again. And WeWork is the sort of the big player in this market. So it'd be interesting to see how it plays out with their strategy in China. They're moving a bit slow at the moment. So I don't know enough about this particular market to comment on it too intelligently, but it seems I wouldn't be surprised if the Chinese local players and Naked Hub, which I think that they themselves say we're a Chinese company, all our staff are Chinese, we're born in China, even though the CEO and some of the top level staff are, as you said before, expats. I think it'll be some combination of those local players that ends up dominating the market, and it's an interesting market because it's also kind of real estate, right? So
it's mostly real estate,
and it's not really a true internet business, right? I mean,
right.
So we count it as tech. Is it quite interesting? Why are we actually talking about it? Because it's you could argue it's not tech.
It's not in some ways. I mean, I think WeWork and Naked Hub most definitely would disagree with that characterization, but it's not a tech led vertical. But certainly, you look at tech companies that are beginning, startups that are beginning in co-working, and including also kind of bunch it all together, acceleration and incubation. I mean, this is where a lot of new tech companies are starting, and so I think that in that sense, it's important as part of the technology ecosystem. Both WeWork and Naked Hub, they are looking more into technological solutions in order to differentiate themselves, in order to attract more customers. But as you say, it's not really a tech vertical in a sense. But it's interesting because co-working, in China, it's really brought together two very strong forces, and both of them are government-led. One strong force, of course, was real estate, and so we can see, over the last 5, 6, 7 years, there's been a lot of investment, there's been a lot of construction, and so real estate is a big area that's just now beginning to slow down. Coupled by the government's push for innovation. And so you look at a lot of the growth in incubators, the growth in accelerators, and these co-working players, and a lot of it is because the government is investing more money in these areas, offering subsidies, offering tax breaks in order to see that. One of their one of the buzzwords in government was shuangchuang. So this kind of double innovation, and the government is very keen on seeing innovation becoming a driver of growth, which is why, again, all of these different companies have sprung up, and why the area just really exploded over the last year. But even now, we are seeing the market cool down with Beijing basically banning all virtual addresses being used, and so you cannot register a company out of a co-working space any longer in Beijing, and we might see similar regulations begin around the country.
Okay, I think makes sense. I agree with everything you said there. It's you can argue that it's tech, right? And it definitely has cooled down.
And okay, so last but not least, we're in the home stretch. So looking at Baidu. So I think that Baidu is a really interesting company. They've had quite a few problems, and they're now beginning to, as a company, again they have iQIYI, but that's a bit of a separate thing. But as a brand, Baidu is now beginning to pivot into artificial intelligence, and of course, one of the biggest events to happen in that regard is looking at Andrew leaving when Baidu was really kind of pushing the fact that they are pivoting into AI, I think was a pretty big blow in terms of public relations. But you look at months after he left, they're going very strong. With some of their AI consumer products, as well as their partnerships with car companies and car technology companies all around the world to create autonomous driving vehicles.
Yep, it was pretty big news when he left, wasn't it? It was a big psychological blow, or maybe just symbolic change, and but they did lose a lot of other top level staff. I think some left, some were poached, and it's not a good sign for the prospects of the company. It's not a good sign of their management either. We don't really know what's going on. It could all be coincidence that these people left at similar times, but certainly Baidu, I think their strategy of pursuing AI is been around for a lot longer than 2017. They have to pursue such a strategy given the fact they've pretty much lost out on mobile, and they're trying not to repeat the same mistake, right, of being late to the party on the new big trends. And from what I've read recently, the sort of their moves in the sort of autonomous car area seem to be making some progress, but it's still quite early days, and it's hard to tell. I mean, I don't know enough about the autonomous driving AI sort of sector to really work out are they gaining some kind of dominance in this area. I really have no idea, but that's where they put all their eggs in that basket. And
well, I think they're being really smart. I think about their AI solutions, because what they're trying to do is make an open platform, and so they're basically adopting a B2B2C model, right. And so it's the Android of AI, Android. So Duar is the Android of AI, and then Apollo is the Android of autonomous driving. Right. But I think the government has basically said that Baidu is the leader of autonomous driving. So I think that's a really good sign for them. They recently approved test drives on public roads. That's another good sign. But also, I think that the government in general is very bullish about autonomous driving, but then artificial intelligence solutions in general. And in fact, we might China might even be the first place to see autonomous driving rolled out on a larger scale. When you think about the number of accidents that happen, you think about the number of traffic violations that happen, every second. I'm not so sure about Chengdu, but in rush hour in Beijing, it's just stupid sometimes. And if you think about even semi-autonomous cars rolled out on a large basis, that could solve a lot of problems. And so ensure that regulations and rules are being followed on a regular basis. That actually the car is not capable of breaking some of these rules and some of these laws, and of course also increasing overall safety. I think autonomous driving is this solution that the government's looking for.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, we don't really know how this is going to play out. Nobody does. But one of the biggest challenges surely has to be, how do we make that switch? How do we switch from where we are now with people driving cars into something where there's autonomous cars maybe mixed in, or there's areas where it's just autonomous? That's a major challenge, not from a technical level. It's a major challenge from a sort of city governance level. And I can't see too many better places than China for just getting that stuff done fast, right? Where the government just says, like, okay, this is ready and we're rolling it out here, and you guys deal with it because this is happening. And
electric vehicles as well. I mean, the government set a target. What is it, 2020? That only electric vehicles can be produced in China, and depending, I mean, they may walk that back a little bit because it does feel a bit extreme. But the timeline feels a bit too short. But I think that just goes to show that if they say, hey, we're going to do this, and then they're very serious about it. And I think that autonomous driving, electric vehicles are a large part of their plans.
It has to be. I mean, like, the pollution situation's still horrible, and it's still one of the main. If they're able to turn that around in any kind of meaningful way, then it's going to have a big impact on society in a very positive way. And I think China, the government is also very aware of, like, China burns more coal than anyone else in the world and contributes to global warming more than anyone else in the world. and that needs to stop. It needs to stop pretty fast, otherwise it's going to have serious implications for the
Well, I mean, I do question whether or not they're doing it for the planet. I think a lot of it is also just because it solves a lot of health problems, or it solves a lot of potential health problems. But then also air pollution is the most visible problem, I think, national problem that the government can move on, related to the speed of development. And of course, there are some other big problems that aren't as visible, namely water pollution and soil pollution, and perhaps even bigger problems than air pollution. But it's easy, right? It's visible, and it's an easy win, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think it's just the incentives are nicely aligned here, where for once the good of the planet and the good of China and what the Chinese government cares about are kind of aligned.
Okay, so Matt, as a way to end this short series that we've done for the end of the year, what did you say? I mean, like, what's your off the wall prediction? What do you think? What do you think is going to happen?
My off the wall not that off the wall, but my sort of going out on a limb a little bit prediction. I think Tencent will make some kind of acquisition of a household name in 2018, something that, like, a big one, like 10 plus billion acquisition, like of a serious, like, well-known company from I have no idea where from, but like they're in so many markets, but like it's quite clear they've got an appetite, and they've had some near misses. They've actually tried to buy Spotify outright and got refused. A couple of years ago, they tried to buy WhatsApp and lost out to Mark on that. I think they will. I think 2018 might be the year they drop a big one, so to speak.
Mm. Yeah, I would say that my going out on a limb prediction is that we will see wide adoption of China's digital currency, and perhaps the first central bank backed digital currency. India's already they are already experimenting with digital IDs and disbursement of funds that way. But I think that we're really going to see a blockchain-based, centralized digital currency coming from China in 2018. And, we talked a little bit about this in one episode, but I think that it really is, I mean, number one, China is primed for it already. I mean, you could basically say all digital transactions, all transactions using Alipay and WeChat Pay use this digital currency. And so for consumers, it would be basically no different. But then the government would have even that much more control and visibility into transactions, which I think is going to be very powerful for better or for worse. And that about does it for this series. Matt, I think honestly this has probably been one of my favorite episode to record so far, just because we're able to go back and forth and talk about a lot of different things. But if you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you left us a review on iTunes, or if you're on Pocket Casts or on Overcast, you can press that star button. It will recommend us to your network.